I'm Lawrence McKenna, here to introduce the interview that took place when we spoke to Patrick Barclay at home. Patrick is one of Britain's most respected sports writers. Currently at the Times, he's written for a plethora of newspapers. Having featured on EPL Talk before, we thought this was the perfect time to invite him back, with the Premiership coming to an end and the World Cup about to begin. During the interview, we discussed Ferguson, UEFA, and why no one deserves to win the title. So here it is, Episode 1 of Patrick Barclay at home.
Take it or leave it, really. I mean, I know I'm a fan of football, and I find that most people sort of empathise with my way of looking at the game, particularly neutral fans or football lovers, you know, who might have their own team but aren't obsessive about it, and which is what I am. So I just sort of work on the basis that if I write for people like myself, then, you know, there's enough of us to keep me in a job for another few years, and so far I've got away with it. I still find it very satisfying. I still find that I can write more or less what I want most of the time. I used to think all of the time, but you get coerced more as time goes on. It is a terrific job, but I mean, to be honest, I shouldn't really say this, but you become harder and harder to stimulate. It's like any other drug, I suppose. You need more of it, or something that just turns out to have a life of its own. I mean, being at Emirates Stadium when Barcelona suddenly came out and as if plugged into some force, gave football that was wonderful even by their standards. You know, when you see something like that, and you look around, you see all the reporters, they've seen 1,000 football matches and their jaws are sagging open. They've never seen anything like it. And I mean, God, you'd be a hopeless case if that kind of thing didn't stimulate you. But it obviously it does become, you know, the highs are harder to find and require a bigger dose. He's, I suppose, yeah, and there are certain people, the affection for whom cuts across club loyalty, and Mourinho would get a good-natured boo on most grounds, wouldn't he? I think even the Liverpool fans who he went like this to, I think they, in fact I saw them at the season after that. That was in a Carling Cup final or something like that, wasn't it, at the Millennium Stadium? And I saw the following season he went out at Stamford Bridge before a Champions League game between Chelsea and Liverpool, and he went out, as he often does when he's finished with his team talk. He leaves the team themselves and goes out, and he went out and he's quite startled because the bench is next to the away fans at Stamford Bridge, or was at that time. So they all went, you know, they all sort of made a noise as he came out, and he was, I think for about a split second he was taken aback, and then he saw that they were all rushing towards him with autograph books and programmes to sign and banter to offer. So I think, you know, that everybody likes him, and I can't help thinking that, yeah, it's only a matter of time before he comes back. Well, in fact, he said that. My favourite, I would say, is Barcelona Camp Nou. And I mean, that to me feels like a spiritual home, as I think it does for many football fans. Bernabeu as well. You know, I don't want to come over all David Mellor, but I do support both. I do like both of those clubs. For example, they just come to mind the great semi-final of the World Cup between Germany and Italy in 2006. Just a fantastic game. Only about 4 chances in 120 minutes, but what a game. What a game. And that was in Dortmund, which contributed to a huge crowd, but very intimate. And And of course, it was the same ground where, before it was modernised, I saw Liverpool Alaves, the great UEFA Cup final, which was memorable for the unforgettable performance of Gary McAllister, you know, in a great game. Sometimes when you're a journalist, you know, you go into the sort of the bowels of a ground, and you maybe the press conference is on the pitch for some reason, and you walk out the tunnel. Now, I don't know about my colleagues, but I fantasize. I pretend to be, and I did it once at the Maracanã. I walked out of that ground where Garrincha and Pele and all the greats have walked out, and I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to be a player. So all that stuff that goes with football, you know, the theatricality of it. Well, I think this was a season that was Chelsea's to dominate. That was the basis. They had the strongest squad since Mourinho was there. They're a proven manager, but a new manager. And they took time to get. Mind you, they always have a new manager, don't they? Since Mourinho. And they took time to get to know him, to feel confident in him. I must say that the response to the defeat by Internazionale was excellent. But what you can never be sure of is, with that age profile, whether they'll go and dip again. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that happened. So Chelsea, I think, Chelsea should have had the league tied up by now. If they turn two of their draws into wins, which they should have done. I'm not thinking particularly of Blackburn, although that was the time when you thought, oh God, do they want to win it or don't they? I think that basically that's all it needed, and they haven't been consistent enough to do that. I think a lot of as a squad, they've let their new manager down. I think for most of the season I've questioned. There's everything. I mean, they're good pros. Don't get me wrong, but they don't look hungry. Even at Old Trafford, where they won, you know, they were kind of hanging on and hoping to get all 3 points, rather than keeping the game by the scruff of the neck, as you'd expect a championship winning side to do. So I can see there being further twists. So it was Chelsea's to win, and they've made a palaver of it. And I think that's basically the story of the season. There's a lot of third or fourth teams, and there's not a first. There doesn't look like there's not a team that truly, and that sometimes happens. I'm not saying that there's always a team that deserves to be champions, but sometimes there are two teams that deserve to be champions. This season, I think the league starts at place 3 and 4. In fact, there's almost a case for not giving any of them automatic entry to the Champions League. It's just not been a vintage season. I mean, it's happened before. I remember back in the mid-80s, 1987, Everton won the league with a mundane team. A very good team in 85, but a mundane team in 87. So you don't know. There's not always a great side that wins the league. But this is one of those seasons. Wayne Rooney, of course, has exceeded expectations. We knew he was good. We didn't know he was this good. We suspected he might be, but how mind-blowing it is for this to happen just before a World Cup. How mind-blowing it is for somebody who, you know, some of us have said could be England's Maradona. Not technically, he'll never be that, but in terms of the force, the footballing spirit, the everything really, who can lift the whole country, as this boy can, and he's proved it this year by lifting a club that's the size of a country. So I mean, he's definitely made the difference. You know, stepped into Cristiano Ronaldo's shoes and his own, and just been the player of the year. I mean, the footballer of the year. Certainly have my vote, and I think in general, if he doesn't vote for him, will just be trying to draw attention to himself. So I think the signing of Valencia is from a long list of Ferguson's specialist subject, the bleeding obvious. You know, you need a goalkeeper, you sign Edwin van der Sar. You need a striker, you sign Wayne Rooney. You need a. It's very, you know, people say it's as hard to manage Manchester United than Accrington Stanley. No, it isn't. I mean, Valencia was quite plainly the best right-sided player outside the top four, so he went and bought it. But I didn't realise, and maybe nobody realised except Ferguson, that he was temperamentally suited to make the step up into the top four, because not all very, very good players can do that. So Valencia has been, to me, an absolutely sensational signing. Most teams make 5 changes and you can see the join. The wonderful thing about Manchester United is, and this is a tribute to Ferguson, is that you can't. You can drop 5, you can bring in Scholes and Giggs, and most of the time they play the same football, they do the same way, they play the same tempo, and they play with the same instinctiveness. That really is a tribute to good management. So they've done okay, but they aren't great. They weren't a great side last year. Barcelona proved that. In a way, I mean, I'm kind of hoping that they don't win a 19th title and a 4th, then make history with a 4th one in a row, because people like me are going to have to be curmudgeonly and point out that we've seen better sides than them. I do think they've got a really good chance. I think they've got a particularly good chance because of the weather. In South Africa it's going to be cold, not just cool but cold, and I can't remember cold days at World Cups. There was a little bit chilly at times at altitude in Mexico in 1986, but this is actually going to be nice English, crisp English spring type weather, maybe, or autumn for a lot of the games, and that's going to be terrific, because although the weather at every football match is the same for both sides, the English have got a hang up, as some of the other Northern European sides do, got a hang up about playing in the warm, as if Africans like it. They don't. As if Brazilians are accustomed to playing in it. Brazilians play football in places like Milan, where it's awful, the winter goes on and on forever, same as it does here. But having said that, there is a thing in English players, they think the heat's out to get them, just the same way as they think the penalty shootout's out to get them. So that's great, they've been lifted, they've had that paranoia lifted for this one World Cup. No excuses, they've got no excuse. What are footballers like? Money and excuses. And they've got no excuse this time, because the manager, by common consent, is brilliant. He's got a record that proves it, from Italy and Spain. Only if Wayne Rooney, God forbid, can't be there, would I have to sort of revise my forecast downwards. I think they've got a very, very good chance indeed. And whilst I know we look at Spain and we watch them outmanoeuvre France on the Stade de France, and we've seen them outmanoeuvre England, albeit a very weakened England team. And we look at Brazil and say, well, anybody who's going to win a World Cup's got to be Brazil. I think England are up there with those 3, and I just have a feeling that just as Spain did what everybody said they'd never do in the European Championship in 2008, I think England will do the same thing in World Cup 2010. What I do is I put a bet on England when they played Portugal in the quarter-finals, was it? In 2006, and the penalty shootout started. I had £4,000 riding on that, and I thought that would make me, deep in my heart, this is not talking about my journalistic head, but deep in my heart, that would make me sad deep in my scrounging Scottish heart, it would make me sad when England missed the penalties and Portugal went through. Right, well, we'll just pick it now.
Sure.
As if we're
Fabio.
You're Baldini and I'm Capello.
Right. Okay.
And no accent. We won't do the accent. No.
No. Okay. Fine.
No accent.
Okay. That's good.
No. The goalkeepers would be James, Hart, and Green.
Mm-hmm.
Lampard and Barry as my two. Holding is perhaps too strong a word, but the first line of midfield, 2 lines of midfield makes a huge difference to England. Huge difference. That flat middle line, honestly, I've seen it for 2 decades. Well, I suppose it's going to have to be Walcott, Rooney and Gerrard, and at the front, Heskey. For defensive purposes, we need Crouch. We also need Defoe. Right, so that gives us just put Milner down, because Milner can play anywhere. Milner could play that right-sided place. If Walcott's not in good shape, I'd rather, Milner's obviously an infinitely superior player, but Walcott does give you that pace, and pace, as everybody keeps saying, pace frightens people. It frightens you them a lot more if the player with the pace can take the ball along with him. Then Joe Cole I would take, proven international player, coming back to fitness, nice and rested. Funnily enough, at left back I would take a player who hasn't played left back much, but I know he can play there because I saw him play in Germany in a friendly. He alternated, and that's Stuart Downing. He can play left back. Now I know there's a risk of ending up with Johnson and Downing as your fullbacks because they're wingers, but I think it's the least worst option. I really do. And Downing, of course, gives you also outside left and left central midfield options as well, in case you lose Barry and you keep your right-left balance there. Well, I've probably forgotten somebody really obvious, like, you can edit this, can't you? Gary Cahill. Now we need one more player. For that reason, I'm really tempted to think about Jack Rodwell. Football managers actually are very good subjects for biographies because they all lie like hell about themselves. They give an impression of themselves, sometimes for good professional reasons. That isn't the whole truth. I remember when I did the Mourinho book, I met at the gym actually a guy who's a friend whose brother was a psychologist. And I said, and he said he's fascinated by Mourinho. And I said, can you get him to give me a rundown on Mourinho, because it'll be useful for the book. And he said, yeah, I'm sure he'll be happy to do that. And he came back and he said, no, my brother said it's absolutely pointless, because the Mourinho that he presents to the world is not the Mourinho that you'd get on a psychiatrist's couch, assuming that Jose needed one. Because he's not telling the truth. He's telling, the professional lies. Oh yeah, my players are all doing well, they're all in great condition. The dressing room could be seething. But of course it would be foolish for him to say so. So they spend their lives shrouded, by lies and half-truths. So actually getting to what they are is fascinating. So you're trying to unveil a character, or you're trying to sort of take the clothes off a character who, remains pretty expertly dressed most of the time in terms of his own image. When I was researching a book about him, Desmond Morris, a brilliant man, who I was lucky enough to be, who said I could consult him about Mourinho because he's a great football man. He used to be on the board at Oxford United, and Desmond said he never liked Brian Clough. He'd talk, he'd be outrageous, but he'd never talk in cliches. He'd always say something. That's why you were always listening to him. He'd never say, well, at the end of the day, blah blah blah, the ball's round, the game is long, the pitch is green. None of that. He's always got something to say. It might be mischievous, but it grabs your attention. Well, the subject matter, I remember that my the literary agent who devised the Mourinho idea, and who I've worked with since, obviously worked with since, he said, right, come on, we're getting on with the next one. I said, listen, David, I'm asking you only one thing. Give me a dead guy to write about. I do not want someone who's in the papers every day, who I'm constantly having to update my research on by cutting cuttings out of the papers. And he said, yep, fine, no problem at all. Yep, I'll find you a dead guy. And I was thinking, you're Herbert Chapman, something like that. A good subject to get your teeth into and really dwell on it. He comes back with Alex Ferguson, who's in the papers more than Mourinho. But it's a great subject, and it's a bigger scale, much bigger scale book. And for me, a very different project because Sir Alex Ferguson is someone who I've kind of lived my life, obviously, in the shadow of, but alongside in a way. I've been. Most English people would know him, if they're old enough, since 1986, but I met him a long time before that, when he was at Aberdeen. I watched his progress with Aberdeen, and in fact I saw him play when he was a teenager for St Johnstone against Dundee on a day when they got relegated and we won the league. So he wasn't always successful. And I didn't even know who he was. So I mean, I've seen so much. So it was what made it good for me. And I was so tempted to concentrate on all the Scottish period, the making of this man, and kind of go a bit more quiet on the English stuff, which is largely in the public domain. But of course, as you get into that, you become more interpretative, because my word, there's a need to interpret Ferguson. I think anyone who's written his own successful autobiography, as Ferguson did in 1999, with the notable help of Hugh McIlvanney, the great sports writer, who's a friend of his. Anything that's cooked up by two people as smart as that needs to be challenged, and that in itself gives much more of a life to the second half, to the English part of the book. So it's very much more ambitious than the Mourinho one from that point of view. But I think it's valid. I think it's valid for those two reasons. You see, if Ferguson's own books, because he wrote one before, if they hadn't been successful, if they hadn't lodged in the public consciousness, as they were bound to with that subject and that co-writer in 1999, then there would be less need for this. But believe me, there is. I just think they'll make a very disturbing situation slightly better. That's the way I see things going. Put it this way, things can't get worse. When you have rampant capitalism, well, anyone who's read the newspapers in the last 2 or 3 years knows what happens. If people are selling products that don't exist, we had the dot-com boom. We thought we'd learn from that, but we hadn't. We then have the economic systems collapse, total collapse, never mind .com, everything goes down the pan. You simply can't treat economics as if it were a religion, something to be followed blindly. Or you can't treat the free market as something that can just be followed blindly. Football in this country is in a big mess. It's they keep, the more they announce bigger overseas sales and so on, all this money coming in, but of course it all goes straight out again. Famous phrase, prune juice economics, used by Sir Alan Sugar. Much better than any of the phrases he coined in his TV career, in my opinion. And so that couldn't go on. So standing still, if we just take England, standing still is just not an option. We can't have the status quo. We just have a increasing inflation until basically we're all Portsmouth. So something had to be done. This may or may not work, but it'll put the brakes on. People will abuse it, but by and large, they will try. If you look at what's happened at Chelsea, for example, and Manchester City, the two most sugar daddy clubs in our league, since Michel Platini's financial fair play proposals were announced in principle, their debts have been very radically reduced. The sugar daddies have said, yeah, you're fine, okay, we'll buy the club, turn it into equity. That's fine, that's a lot better. There's no problem with that. People should be able to buy anything they want. We will still have the problem in England of ownership debt, but that's a side issue. The main thing is that the financial fair play will stop the pressure on well-run footballing institutions such as the Bundesliga. Okay, not perfect, but much better run than ours, and not so friendly to foreign entrepreneurs, to put it as kindly as we can. The pressure on the Germans to break ranks and do wrong things in order to keep up with us will be reduced by this, and that's a good thing for everybody, including us. So I just think it won't make a level playing field. It doesn't mean that Albion Rovers will be able to compete for players with Real Madrid, but in fact it might even enshrine the principle of some clubs are bigger than others, but that happens anyway. And I think the opportunity for smaller clubs to have good years, as Deportivo La Coruña did in Spain, as Parma did before that in Italy, as Porto did in Europe as a whole, and Monaco in the same year, the chance of these mini booms carrying on, which everyone said would never happen again after Bosman destroyed the great Ajax. I think we'll still have that, but by and large, a Manchester club, it might be United, it might be City, and Arsenal will be near the top in England, and Real Madrid and Barcelona will run Spain, and if you go down to Scotland, Rangers and Celtic will be, assuming they can't break ranks and come down to England, will be on top, and Ajax and PSV and Feyenoord will be on top, so it'll be the same as it was in the days of the free market, but cheaper and less inflationary, and less likely that clubs will go out of business cheating the taxpayer, as Portsmouth have done, and that's got to be good.